From the KSL Broadcast House, this is Sunday Edition with Doug Wright.
And welcome to Sunday Edition, coming to you from my home in Holiday, and from all of us at KSL, certainly here on Sunday Edition, we wish you a very happy 4th of July as we all celebrate our American independence this weekend. Coming up on the program, we're going to talk about several plans afoot to help Utah families. But before we do, I wanted to talk about the upcoming election of 2022, and especially the Senate race. We have the second Republican woman now who has declared candidacy, seeking the seat that is currently held by Senator Mike Lee. Isom is joining us on Sunday Edition. And Ali, thank you for taking the time. I'm very interested to chat with you today and find out a little bit more about the campaign, the listening tour that you are launching right now. Let me ask you, however, I'm always interested in this. Many people sit and participate in politics, as you have, watch it very closely, but somewhere along the line, for some, a rarefied some, there's that tipping point, that straw that proverbially breaks the camel's back. And for you, what was the issue that finally had you deciding to throw your hat in the ring?
For me, Doug, it's been cumulative over the past few years, to be honest, and it probably culminated in early January for me. In the first week of January, on 3 consecutive days, 3 women reached out to me, 3 women whom I highly regard, whose names might be recognizable to folks, and they each asked me to seriously consider the 2022 Senate race. And in the past, when people have said to me, I wish you'd run for office, I sort of think, yeah, you don't really know what you're talking. That's really nice, but maybe that's a little more than you think it is. And this time, it felt different to me. Something felt very different. And by the 3rd day and the 3rd woman, I started to take notice. And then that afternoon, later that morning, on January 6th, our Capitol was under attack. And I watched in tears, like so many. And I thought, I want my country back. I want my party back. This isn't who we are, and we can do better. We need to do better. And it felt like if we don't stand up as good people and say enough of the anger and the hostility and the rancor, and we find a way to solutions where everyone feels heard and seen, if good people don't take that on, we have no right to criticize what's happening. And I just felt a responsibility.
As you have already alluded to, there was something about January 6th that touched me like no other event that has occurred during my lifetime. I saw the death of President Kennedy, the assassinations that followed, the tragedies that I went through, Watergate, 9/11, but honestly, Ali, nothing affected me and just horrified me. Some things made me a little more sad, like the death of President Kennedy, but nothing horrified me and made me fear for our country more than January 6th. Would you say that that indeed was, if you had to narrow it down to just one thing, it was January 6th where you went, I'm in?
It felt like a tipping point for me in many ways, and it felt like an event that we finally said enough. And it felt very symbolic. I think in this country, we have an underlying problem of anger, and it spills out because we feel so marginalized by institutions and processes and organizations at this point. And I think the pandemic made much of that worse. Our emotional resilience was perhaps frayed a bit, but it also felt like I can't believe we've come to the point where people are so frustrated with what's happening that they would resort to physical action like this. It's one thing to protest, it's another thing to break into a building. And I feel like, there's 90% of the people that were there that day didn't break in, but they were out on the square, and they nevertheless felt unheard and unseen. And I feel like we have a responsibility to engage them, to understand them. And I think that's a symptom that many of us have felt, that we felt unseen and unheard. And it's just become I felt like it was a tipping point for me.
We're talking with Isom, who has worked in the administration of Governor Gary Herbert. She's worked in the Public Relations Department for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, has been involved in private business. Her husband, Eric, also has been very involved in politics and business here in the state of Utah. I have to ask the question, some would say taking on a sitting senator, first of all, the incumbency is powerful, a Republican in a very Republican state, and someone who, especially for the right wing of the Republican Party, is a darling of the party right now and was a darling, honestly, of President Trump. How difficult is this battle going to be for you, for Becky Edwards, and others who choose to step up?
Well, I have no illusions about what it's going to take financially or organizationally, which is why I was very intentional about this decision, about the timing. I spent several months speaking with people who I think are astute at assessing the landscape and the potential and thinking through what that could look like. And I spent a lot of time gathering data and assessing the vulnerability of the incumbent and the viability of myself. And I've been very strategic about this, but in the end, a year's a long time. A lot can happen. And so I really plan to spend the next year listening to Utahns, walking with Utahns. As you know, I kicked off my Walk a Mile effort yesterday, where I plan to visit every community in this state and walk a mile with community leaders and officials and PTA presidents and ranchers and Main Street business owners to try to understand what's top of mind and in the heart and soul of Utahns right now. What do they want and need from their representation in Washington, D.C.? And I feel very strongly, if I do that, if I spend the time, if I do the work to understand them, I think I can be better suited to represent the state. And that's something that I think is missing right now. And something I think is so very needed. When people feel seen and heard, and they feel actually valued for who they are and what they bring, they feel part of the process, then we all start to get better outcomes.
We only have less than a minute here, Ali, but I have to ask you, and many people look back to 2010 when Senator Lee was elected, and at that time we did not have SB 54. There was not the alternative path to get onto the ballot. Some argue, had that been around, we probably would have had Senator Bennett for another term. He probably would have died in office with his cancer that he was dealing with. How important is the petition process for you? Are you going to exclusively do that over caucus convention or both?
I think both avenues have merit and value in the long run. I do plan to pursue this nomination through the delegate process. I recognize that that process heavily favors incumbency, so we will also be seeking signatures to ensure we're on the ballot. And I think that has some tremendous value in saying to Utahns, I'm willing to work for your vote, and I want your support in getting onto the ballot. So I think both tracks have merit, and I think we will be pursuing both simultaneously.
Ali, I so appreciate you joining us on the program. We'll obviously have many more discussions. I wish you a very happy Independence Day. Give my best to Eric and your family.
Well, thank you, and happy 4th of July to everyone as well. It's a great day to be an American, and I'm certainly proud to be one.
We are going to come back and talk about other issues on Sunday Edition, so stay with us. We'll take a look at how various programs are going to help our Utah families. This month, the month of July, we are going to get advances. Many parents, as a matter of fact, parents of about 88% of the children here in the United States of America under the Biden administration now will not just get the child tax credit, but will get it in advance. We wanted to talk about that. I've heard a lot of questions, a lot of discussions on how it works, what can be expected, how it affects taxes that are coming up. And Matthew Weinstein joins us right now from the advocacy group Voices for Utah Children. And Matthew, first of all, thank you for your time. Happy 4th of July to you. And maybe you could tell us exactly how this is going to work. When do people start to receive their checks? And I understand based on the age of the child, it can vary by about $50 or so. So give us a thumbnail sketch. What is planned for this?
So it starts on July 15th, and the amount will be $250 per child for age 6 to 17, and for the youngest children, age 0 to 5, $300 per month per child, no limit on the number of children. And this is something that has come along under the American Rescue Plan Act that was passed by Congress as just a one-year improvement for the coming year, so that families will get half of that full amount on a monthly basis starting in July 15th, and then the other half when they file their taxes at the usual time in 2022. But the amount that they're getting is a lot bigger than in the past. And this is the improvement that we've seen because of how popular the child tax credit has become. First, we saw Senator Mike Lee played a key role in 2017 in doubling the size of the child tax credit from $1,000 per child to $2,000 per child, and we thank him for his role in that. The refundable portion for families that don't have income tax liability was also improved to $1,400 per child. But I think that a lot of people noticed since then that there were families that weren't receiving the full amount. There were about 10% of kids that were receiving a much smaller amount or no amount at all. And in Utah, actually about a quarter of families weren't getting that full $2,000 per child. And so that's where the idea came up and came from different directions. We saw this proposed both by President Biden and by Senator Mitt Romney to improve the child tax credit, make it monthly, make it a larger amount, and ensure that all kids get it, notwithstanding what the income of the parents might be. And that'll be a big boost, especially for lower income families, but also for middle class families.
I've heard conversations surrounding this, and with our taxes here in our home, Dee and I do not have a dog in this fight, as it were. So I'm a little interested, can you opt into this or out of this and do it the traditional way with those higher amounts and just basically get the benefit when you file your taxes? Is there an opt-in or opt-out?
Sure, absolutely. People can opt out. They've tried to make it as easy as possible. They've set up a web page at childtaxcredit.gov, and that's to help ensure that if people, there actually were a certain percentage of kids, about 2.5%, which adds up to about 25,000 Utah kids who weren't receiving it at all because their parents just weren't filing their taxes. So if you're in that group and you're among the ones who weren't filing taxes because your income was too low, that you didn't need to, or you just forgot in past years, if you didn't receive those stimulus checks, then you're not in the IRS system. And so now is the time to go to that childtaxcredit.gov and sign up, make sure. But you can also go there to opt out if you don't want to get the monthly payments and you prefer to wait until you file your taxes next year.
Do we have any gut feel at all for how people are falling on that? Are they opting in, opting out? And how big of an effect is this going to have on our Utah families? We gave the national statistics about the parents of 88% of the kids in the country will benefit from this. Is the statistic similar here in Utah?
It is. The data that I have is about 90% of Utah kids will benefit from this. that it's something that making it monthly especially helps lower income families with their budgeting. Our experience has been that when we go and talk to families at the volunteer income tax assistance sites, there were a lot of families that are using their tax refund when they get that in February or March or April to pay down debt, that they had run up debt at Christmas time or just in the course of the year to keep their car going or to meet other expenses for their children or to make sure they can make it to work. Now, fewer people will have to go into debt. They won't have to take out payday loans. They won't have to go into debt on their credit cards because they'll be getting that $250 or $300 per child every month directly deposited into their bank account. And that's really important to avoid that debt trap, not have to pay those really outrageous interest rates that you pay on payday loans or credit cards.
I try to imagine for any important part of any of our budgeting, if everything was just given at one point in one lump sum or one benefit during the course of the year, everyone knows it's much easier, first of all, to manage the money, control the money, be responsible with the money, if you can pay out on a monthly basis. So this seems to make sense, and it seems to resonate, as you mentioned, not only the President of the United States, but also you look at Mitt Romney, you look at the efforts that even Mike Lee has put into this over the years that goes back beyond this. This seems to really make sense, and especially in Utah, where a very conservative point of view says, let us have some of this control. Let us decide what's best for the parents to do, and this seems to enable it to be done not only that way, but on a time frame that works better for Utah families.
Yeah, and I mean, it's something that Utah has been the #1 state in the nation for the child tax credit. We have the highest percentage of kids in the nation, 29%, much higher than the national average. And so it's no surprise that it's been Senator Mitt Romney who's been in the lead on proposing these improvements over the last year. And in fact, there's an innovation that he's proposed in his Family Security Act to have not the IRS send out the monthly payments, but rather the Social Security Administration, that we support, that we think would help even more kids, because that would help cover those, roughly 25,000 kids whose parents haven't been filing taxes, but they do have Social Security numbers. And the Social Security Administration would be able to ensure that they get those funds.
From Voices for Utah Children, we've been talking with Matthew Weinstein. And Matthew, just very quickly, for anybody who has questions, where should they go?
Childtaxcredit.gov has terrific information. You can also go to taxhelput.org.
We thank you for joining us on Sunday Edition, and again, have a very happy Independence Day. Coming up next on Sunday Edition, we're going to look at another aspect of help in the state of Utah for our families, especially when it comes to food insecurity. Let's go. For many of us here in the great state of Utah, we look around and it's just hard to imagine that 8% of Utahns are concerned about having enough food on their tables. During the height of the pandemic, it was 1 in 5, 20% were concerned about the food insecurity. That's an interesting term that we'd like to discuss. A task force has been put together to look into this, and I so appreciate a member of the task force, Shireen Gorbani, joining us on the program today. And Shireen, thank you again for joining us on Sunday Edition. We've had a lot of discussions over now many years on radio and on television in various capacities. Tell us about the task force and the task at hand.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So this is an effort that was born out of legislative work by Senator Luz Escamilla, really looking at taking a deep understanding of what's happening around the issue of food insecurity, or more broadly, so now I work for Intermountain Healthcare, thinking about nutrition security. What kind of food do people have access to? And during the pandemic, we just learned in many startling ways the shortcomings in our emergency food system, and are looking for ways across our entire system to do a better job. And when I say our entire system, looking at the entire state. What are the functions that are happening in state government in particular that could be doing more to intervene so that families do not go without the food that they need?
It is so hard for me to imagine. I did not come from a wealthy background. My mother was a school teacher, and we would have been labeled lower middle class at that time. I cannot recall a hungry day in my life that wasn't intended. And when I read the statistics, the number of people that do experience food insecurity, if not outright hunger, it's shocking to me.
It absolutely is shocking. And I think one of the things that has always been important to me to be thinking about is really what this does for those that are the most vulnerable in our community. We know that when kids don't get enough to eat, they do not have success in our school systems. They're unable to really function throughout the day. We know that kids experience, greater behavioral problems. We also know that this is really a devastating impact for everyone, but especially for seniors across our community. There are a number of resources that are already available, from SNAP, which is the new the food stamp program is now called SNAP, so individuals can get connected there. We have Meals on Wheels delivering food across our entire state, but people don't always know about the resources that are available, and we're not always doing as much as we could to screen individuals and understand the depth of the need for interventions to make sure that people can keep themselves fed. Fed Utahns, healthy, successful Utahns contribute to the state in greater ways. They have higher educational attainment. There's so much more stability that comes when families can get the food that they need.
As you analyze the task force and the task at hand, as I've already mentioned, how will you measure the success, or how will you know the success in a year or two or three? What are the measurements? What do you hope for and anticipate?
So that's the really exciting thing about what Senator Escamilla has put together here. So a number of individuals across state agencies have been appointed. There are interested parties, groups like Intermountain Healthcare and many others that are also connected and working on this issue. But what we're hoping to understand from this task force is what the policy or interventions might be that aren't currently underway. So it gives us the opportunity over 3 meetings to bring together a lot of powerful institutions that work across the entire state to really identify key outcomes and create a plan for action.
Shireen, it's always a great pleasure to have you on Sunday Edition. For people who would like to maybe keep an eye on the task force, is there a website? Is there a way we can keep up to date?
Yeah, so this is a place where you're getting information just like going to le.utah.gov. You would be able to put in food security and search and connect that way. You can also, follow along with me on my social media. I'm posting about it as well as Senator Escamilla. So this is something that's moving forward. There are just 3 meetings, but then hopefully there'll be a number of issues that come, or priorities that come out of the work.
Shireen, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, have a very happy 4th of July. Music and the spoken word is coming up next.